Hi, Happy New Year. If you don't know me, my name is Stella Joe. And if you do know me, my name is still Stella Joe. And this is my living room. I've never filmed a video in here before, I don't think. I have a tiny mic and my cell phone. So if this video sounds and looks horrendous, forgive me. But I think in 2024, I had a pretty fraught relationship with uploading on YouTube. Not that you saw that, but in my own mind, it felt like every video I needed to upload had to be absolutely perfect. And then I don't think anything I uploaded last year was perfect at all. So I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. No expectations. You get what you get and you don't get upset. On Christmas, I tweeted, and by tweeted, I mean posted on Blue Sky because that's where I live now. I tweeted on Blue Sky that for Christmas this year, I'm giving you the gift of my opinions. And today, that's exactly what you're going to get because we are going to be recapping in chronological order every single movie I watched in 2024. Am I maybe a week late to uploading a year-end recap of everything I did in the year? Yes. Also, I don't have a Letterboxd account. I feel like if I was on Letterboxd, maybe some people would follow me there, but I'm sorry, you can't make me download another app. I keep track of everything I watch and read and listen to in my Notion board. I will leave the template to my media tracker down below. You can use it if you want. Like I said, we are going in chronological order because I think the order in which I watched movies over the course of 2024 gets really funny. It gets really silly up in here. To kick off the year, we actually start at a high point and then we dip really fast. First movie I watched on January 5th was Past Lives. Oh my god, this movie. You know that trope that's like, it's like New York City as a character? I feel like Past Lives, directed by Celine Song, is one of the most honest portrayals of New York City I've seen in many, many years. If you're unfamiliar, Past Lives is a movie about a woman named Nora who grew up partially in South Korea and then quickly immigrated to America with her family and left behind a very close childhood friend. They then later reconnect as adults when he comes to visit her in New York City. It's so beautiful. It's about what could have been and what is and the paths our lives take. And it just touches on the fact that like we can never go back and change the decisions that we made or the paths that our lives took. And to think about the what ifs is nice, but it doesn't work to dwell on it. God, this movie is so beautiful. Next, on January 7th, I watched The Holdovers, directed by Alexander Payne. Listen, I know this is a Christmas movie, and I probably should have watched it in December, and I wanted to watch it this year again during the Christmas season, but I didn't get around to it. Oh my god, I feel like if you haven't heard anything about this movie, you've heard about Divine Joy Randolph, who won like every single award possible for supporting actress in this movie. It's about a teacher, a student, and a chef at a boarding school in New England. We'll circle around to that trope later in the year, trust and believe. This movie is so funny and heartfelt, and I have a soft spot for the sort of 70s aesthetic, so I am a big, big fan of all the costuming and film choices that are made in this movie. I love everything about this movie. It is so good. It's about family. It's about connecting with people that you wouldn't otherwise connect with. It's about being at a boarding school in New England during the winter. That one shot of Paul Giamatti when he's like power walking down the path and he picks up a football and chucks it and it goes maybe 7 inches away from him. I think about that shot a lot. If you can't tell by now, also, I can never remember any character names from any movie ever. So get ready for that. Next, I took a bit of a break from watching movies, according to my Notion tracker, because the next movie I watched on February 20th, 2024 was Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. Now, listen, okay? I thought that this movie was beautiful. I think Cillian Murphy can do whatever he wants forever. And if he wants to play Oppenheimer, good for him. I gave this movie 3 stars because it was too long, and I think I just don't like biopics. On March 1st, I watched Poor Things, starring Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe, and who's the other guy in it? Mark Ruffalo. I am not a Yorgos girly. I really didn't like The Favorite, which is surprising because hello, lesbianism. Something about the animal abuse I just really can't get behind. But there is a distinct lack of animal abuse in Poor Things, I think. the aesthetics of it alone, I think, were enough to draw me in. I think the pacing was a little weird, and I think the question about Bella's sexuality in the movie is something that's really interesting. I saw a lot of people be like, she's basically just a child, but she loves having sex. I think that's an interesting question to pose in a movie, and I think like morality around that is sort of the point. And I think posing that morality question and that sort of ethical question doesn't make a film good or bad. Also, I love Emma Stone. Holy shit, I love Emma Stone. Here we go into a wild stretch. My March and April viewing habits are kind of insane. On March 10th, I watched Damsel, starring Millie Bobby Brown. I gave it 2 stars. I watched this movie because of the trailer, and I wish I hadn't. Well, one, I wish I hadn't watched the movie, but two, I wish I hadn't watched the trailer because the trailer spoils the entire film. The premise of the film is that there is this girl who is a princess, and she goes to another kingdom to get married to a prince, but plot twist, and it's like not even a spoiler because it's like in the trailer, plot twist, she gets sacrificed because the kingdom that she was like supposedly getting married into, it's like every year they have to sacrifice 3 young girls to a dragon, or else the dragon will hurt the whole kingdom. This movie was boring, and I think it was like a brand of sort of palatable feminism that I just can't bring myself to care about anymore. Very much like girl boss, princess turned badass, sword wielding, dragon slaying queen. Personally, I think all the princesses that got sacrificed to the dragon should have hung out in the dragon's den and kissed each other on the mouth a lot, all 3 of them. Another trope will come back around to very shortly. Don't worry. On March 15th, I watched Asteroid City, a Wes Anderson movie. I have sort of fallen off the Wes Anderson train because he picked up Timothée Chalamet, and I refuse to watch anything starring Timothée Chalamet. He doesn't know me, but we have personal beef. Anyway, he's not in Asteroid City, and I liked this movie a lot. There's people doing things in this movie that are so wacky and wild, and I'm here for Wes Anderson making actors do silly little things, and it's just visually stunning. Okay, on March 16th, I did watch Madam Web. I got invited to a friend's house to watch Madam Web, and I think the Partyful Invitations title was like, you do not have to say yes to watching Madam Web with us, or something. And I did say yes. I did give it 1 star because that's the lowest I can give it on the way that I have my Notion board set up. I could not tell you what happened in this movie, but what I can tell you is that in the middle of our viewing, my friend Zoe said, there is such a lack of spiders happening, and I think that really just sums it up. And also, this is a spoiler, the movie ends and like the 3 teen girls, who again are like a trio of like girl boss queen, don't need no man, I eat math for breakfast kind of girls, they never get superpowers. And I think they were setting up for a sequel for them to get superpowers, but here's the thing, I would have loved for them to get superpowers in this movie, and they never do. Next, on March 31st, I watched Uptown Girls. Listen, I grew up with this movie, and then there was that trend on TikTok of the 2 photos of them in the teacups, and it was like younger self, older self looking at each other meme, and I was like, well, I guess I have to watch Uptown Girls again. This movie holds up. It's really good. Brittany Murphy is a gem and a half. May she rest in peace. And Dakota Fanning, that girl is a star. She got the assignment. Also, I very frequently think about the scene where Brittany Murphy is in the laundromat and she realizes that she has to wash the underwear that she's wearing. So she just strips off her underwear and throws it in the washing machine. And sometimes when I'm at the laundromat, I'm like, I could be doing that with the pair of underwear I'm wearing right now. On April 2nd, I watched Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet. I love this fucking movie. This is a rewatch for me, but I think this play has been done so many times. One could say millions of times. And it's crazy that of all of the millions of productions, Harold Perrineau as Mercutio did it the best. He did it the best. What's funny too is I was thinking about this movie more recently than when I watched it in April because I saw the production of Romeo and Juliet starring Kit Connor and Rachel Zegler, which I really liked. But the thing that I was saying about it as like sort of a point of criticism was that like it doesn't modernize Romeo and Juliet any differently than Baz Luhrmann already modernized Romeo and Juliet, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. This movie is perfect to me. This scene at the Capulet party with Claire Danes and Leo DiCaprio on either side of the fish tank, and they like are trying to get closer to each other, and he like is rubbing his face against the glass to try and like get closer to her. Also, he looks like a butch lesbian in this movie. Next up, on April 6th, I had a by myself double feature at home of two pretty bad movies. First one was How to Date Billy Walsh. This is a Amazon Prime movie. Boo, we hate you. I only watched it because it stars Sebastian Croft, who I loved in Heartstopper, and the girl that played the younger Sharma sister in Bridgerton. And I was like, I really like both of these actors. Let's see what they got in a silly British teen romantic comedy. And it's bad. It's got a bad premise of this kid trying to intercept his best friend who is a girl. She has this crush on this guy named Billy Walsh who like wears leather jackets and rides a motorcycle. And he's like, I'm a nice guy. Like I'm perfect for her, but we're best friends and I'm in the friend zone. It's like, guys, it's 2024 and it's not even 2024 anymore. It's 2025. We're still doing the thing of like male loneliness epidemic. I'm friend zoned and boys and girls can't be friends. Why? I gave it 2 stars because I really, really, really find British teenagers very endearing. Next, later that night, I watched Nowhere Boy by Sam Taylor Johnson, famously starring Aaron Taylor Johnson as John Lennon. This is so embarrassing. The only reason I watched this movie, because back in April, all my TikTok For You page was edits of The Marauders with Aaron Taylor Johnson in this movie as James Potter, which is like the fan cast since the dawn of time, I think. But it made me want to watch the movie. Sorry, he's got those cute little glasses and that silly little pompadour, and I wanted to watch him in the movie. John Lennon's life is very, very interesting and sad at some points, and the Beatles' origin story is very cool. This movie is just boring. The Liverpool accent, though, again, I do love. I find British people very, very charming. Next up, on April 7th, I watched Almost Famous, one of my favorite movies of all time. I just had a craving. I think after I watched Nowhere Boy, I was like, I need to watch something about a band that doesn't make me want to fall asleep and or scream. And so Almost Famous it is. If you're unfamiliar with this movie, please become familiar with this movie. Kate Hudson is so beautiful and gorgeous and talented and stunning, and I love her. Almost Famous is about this kid who really, really loves rock music, and he pretends to be a adult journalist and gets hired by Rolling Stone to follow this band around on their tour in the 1970s and do like a cover story about the band. If you're a fan of 70s rock, this movie is required viewing. On April 11th, I watched The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Here's the thing about this movie. I love The Hunger Games. I did not read this prequel. Maybe I should. Maybe I will do that. I'm literally looking at it on my shelf right now. I've actually been meaning to do like a full Hunger Games reread. So maybe I'll do that this year. But I've only seen the movie. I haven't read the book. This movie is very oddly paced, isn't it? Number one, I will say I am a Rachel Zegler defender. She gets so much hate for no freaking reason. And she's very, very good in this movie. Her little Appalachia accent, I really, really love. She's obviously a great singer. I love that little rainbow skirt she wears during the games. But the pacing is so odd. And also, I just don't care about President Snow. Like, I don't think the point of this movie is to make you empathize with Snow and say like, oh, well, this is why he became a fascist, so I guess we forgive him. But you did cast like one of the most conventionally attractive actors on the market right now to play him. I do think that Lionsgate suffers a lot when it comes to the marketing of these movies. When I was like 16 and Catching Fire was coming out, I made a YouTube video on here that has since since been privated about how much I hate the marketing around the Hunger Games, because one of the hugest themes in the series is how the media itself promotes fascism, and a giant movie production company I don't think is allowed to do that. I don't think Hollywood lets them do that. So it kind of suffers from a disease of sort of being unmarketable. And I think this film is no exception. Next up, we have Problemista by Julio Torres, who also stars in it. And I think he wrote and directed it. I really, really loved this movie. I'm just a fan of anything that is so truly original, truly singular, truly not trying to be anything else. I think the dynamic that Julio Torres and Tilda Swinton have in this movie is so hysterical. And I think like stories of immigration are very fraught in the US right now, but I think like his take on it and how he is just really, really honest about like the visa process and what it is like talking to immigration lawyers and what it's like trying to get jobs and sponsors while trying to stay in the US and like what that truly means is so wonderful. Next up, oh my God, you guys. Okay, here's the thing. I had a little bit of a dry spell in May, but that was because on May 21st, I watched Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino. And then for the next week, I watched Challengers 4 more times. This is the movie of the year for me. For those unfamiliar, Challengers stars Zendaya as Tashi Duncan, Mike Faist as Art Donaldson, and Josh O'Connor as Patrick Zweig, and they're all tennis players. And it's the most juicy love triangle I've ever seen in my life. First of all, it's a total vibe. So like if you're not vibing with it from the get-go, like I don't think you're gonna enjoy it. But if you like good music, good sports action sequences, and bisexuality, I think you're really gonna love this movie. It did sort of open my eyes, clear the fog, so to speak, about love triangles for me, and maybe that was biphobic of me, but I do think that all love triangles need to be about 3 bisexual people all in love with each other in a fucked up weird way. The thing about the dynamic between the 3 main characters is that Patrick loves tennis and Tashi, but he loves art the most. And the thing about art is that he loves Patrick and tennis, but he loves Tashi the most. And the thing about Tashi is that she loves art and Patrick, but she loves tennis the most. The girls that get it, get it. This is the movie of all time. And it's written by the guy that made the potion seller video. What more could you want? After my Challengers binge, I then watched on June 11th, All of Us Strangers, bit of a tonal shift, also gave it 5 stars. All of Us Strangers stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, which I think if you haven't seen the movie, you have definitely seen some of the press tour from this movie, because these 2 guys are so good at doing press together. And I was really, really excited to see their dynamic. I will say the dynamic they have on the press tour, not the dynamic they have in the movie. I knew it was sad. I knew it was a sad movie going in, and it was about this guy who had lost his parents and he was grieving and sort of like seeing their ghosts, and he meets this younger guy and they get into a relationship. But I wasn't expecting it to be that devastating. The reveal about I think it's like 2/3 in, maybe there's like 30 to 40 minutes left of the movie when they go to his childhood home. I had to pause. I had to pause the movie. I had to pause the movie and hold my head in my hands. Next up, on June 27th, I watched Lisa Frankenstein. I think I need to watch this movie again. I will confess that I watched it on an airplane to Los Angeles. Not the best movie viewing experience, I will say. This movie is about a girl in the 80s who loves to hang out in this graveyard, and she comes across this grave of a guy that she like basically like manic pixie dream boys into Frankensteining him to like be her boyfriend, and they do end up like falling in love, and she like learns how to make him new parts, and like he learns how to become a more functional human again. It's very sweet and very silly, and I didn't know that it was like kind of a bottom style satire movie, so I think I need to watch it again knowing that. I did really love the aesthetics of it though. On June 30th, I watched Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow. And then, similarly, I watched it about 4 more times over the course of the next week and a half. This movie has gotten a lot of discussion around it. And I think a lot of people just like didn't vibe with it, didn't get it, didn't understand what was going on. And like, it is a very sort of vibes-based movie, but hey, I got it. It has stuck with me the entire year. I think. It's one of those movies that has stuck with me the entire year. The premise of I Saw the TV Glow is about these two kids named Owen and Maddie, and they are both feeling very stuck and very lost in this like suburban town that they live in. And then things start getting kind of surreal. They bond over this TV show called The Pink Opaque, which is about these two girls who have psychic powers and they're like psychically bonded. And it's sort of like a Buffy homage and like a Monster of the Week homage. And surrealism ensues. And oh my God, I know a lot of people who saw it the first time and like wept immediately, just started like crying immediately. The first time I watched it, I was sort of just like shocked by the whole thing. I was like just sort of like stark still, no reaction in a kind of like frightening way. And then I watched it again and then I did cry. Especially like I think once you know where they end up and you watch it back, the beginning of the movie is so much sadder. I don't want to spoil it at all, but recommend, especially if you're queer. Hey, my fellow gaybies out there, I need you to watch this movie, okay? On July 3rd, I watched The Kids Are All Right. This is a good movie. Hey, now this movie's pretty good. I watched this movie over the 4th of July weekend with my dad, and it stars Julianne Moore as a lesbian. It's about this lesbian couple and their two kids who are both teenagers. One's about to go to college. One is, I think, like a couple years younger. And they get in touch with their biological father, played by Mark Ruffalo, who is like this cool farm to table restaurant owner, chef guy. And they like immediately bond with him and like try and get to know him. And there is some criticism of this movie because at some point Julianne Moore like does have sex with him and has an affair outside of her lesbian relationship. I think it's all part of it. It's just all part of it, and it's part of like exploring how manipulative men can be. And I think lesbians are not immune to male manipulation as much as we try to not be. And I think that conversation is really interesting. And ultimately, the lesbians win in the end. Next, on July 4th, I watched Hitchcock, which is a biopic. This biopic I actually really did like. I only gave it 3 stars, but I do really, really love the scene of him in the movie theater listening to people watch Psycho. It's about the making of Psycho, when Alfred Hitchcock made Psycho. You know that movie. The you know the one. And he's like listening to the screams of the people in the theater and he's like conducting it like an orchestra. It's really, really good. It's very campy in a way that I think a biopic should be, especially in that time period of like the 1950s where everything was like the movie industry was so technicolor at that point. And so it sort of follows that aesthetic when talking about a like iconic horror movie. On July 17th, I rewatched Knives Out. So a bunch of my friends are in a movie club and they watch a movie every week. They started by watching every single Adam Sandler movie and then watched every single Drew Barrymore movie, which did involve rewatching some of the Adam Sandler movies. And then after they did that, they were like, we can't do this anymore. So we're just going to do like themed movies. And the theme then was Go Grandpa. And it was like about like cool old guys. And I don't remember who picked Knives Out, but I was here in my home and they were watching it in my house. Knives Out is great. I know we're getting like another Knives Out this year, I think. I'm still holding out hope for a Benoit Blanc movie where it is just Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc and the rest of the cast is the Muppets. I would like that very much. Thank you. Next up, oh my God. Okay, hit another dry spell in July. And then on August 9th, a bunch of my friends thought, you know what would be fun if we all got together in Stella's house and sat on this couch and watched Jupiter Ascending. You know movies that are so bad they're good? This is not one of those movies. IMHO. Listen, a lot of my friends had a lot of fun with it. They thought it was very silly. I could not get into it. I don't know what it is about Jupiter Ascending. This is actually the second time I've watched Jupiter Ascending. And the first time I didn't really love it either. And this time I was just like, it made me mad. It just made me mad. Everything about it made me mad. The world building is bad. Eddie Redmayne doing that fuck ass accent is bad. I couldn't even tell you what this movie is about. I think it's about this girl who is from Jupiter, but then gets like spirited away to Earth and has lived her life there as like a housekeeper, and then she like comes into royalty on Jupiter, and there's like some weird like anti-aging stuff going on, some like Fountain of Youth thing, and Channing Tatum is like kind of a werewolf guy, I think. And Eddie Redmayne is doing just the worst vocal affectations I've ever heard in my life. I think he actually did an interview afterwards where somebody asked him, like, why did you do that in Jupiter Ascending? And he straight up was like, it was a bad decision. It was bad. It didn't work. I cannot believe my friends had a good time watching this movie. I cannot stress to you how bad a time I had watching this movie. Anyway, after that, on September 16th, we had an upswing because this is the time I watched When Harry Met Sally for the first time. Can you believe I've never seen When Harry Met Sally? I dress like this, and I've never seen When Harry Met Sally up until September of this past year. Rom-com of all time. This is another one where I think the portrayal of New York City is very, very honest. I think there is some criticism to be had because it does sort of fall into the like, can men and women really be friends kind of conversation. But I think when you look beyond that, it really is about like, where does the line of friendship end, and like who is willing to step over that line, and sort of like the fear of stepping over that line. Because obviously, like, when you care about someone a lot as a friend and you treasure a friendship that much, and that friendship like already feels very, very intimate, you don't want to mess that up by introducing romantic feelings into it. And I think answering that question is timeless. On September 20th, I watched Blade Runner 2049, and it was a rewatch for me. I had watched Blade Runner 2049 in theaters, and I love the original Blade Runner so much. More than that, I love the book that it's based on so, so much. Highly recommend. If you haven't read the book and you're a fan of Blade Runner, read the book. In the book, Deckard has a wife, and the whole thing takes place in one day. I read it in high school and it was so good. It changed my like entire worldview about sci-fi. So good. Let's talk about 2049. So 2049 is a sequel to Blade Runner, and I think we're just trying to do a lot at once in this movie. And I think the conversations that are happening in it with Ryan Gosling's character about like what really constitutes a soul, and when he starts thinking like, am I actually a human being and just everybody's been treating me like an android, that sort of conversation is really interesting. And then we bring Harrison Ford back and it's like, I don't think this guy needed to be here. I think Decker's story sort of wrapped up in the first one, and we could have just hung out in the Blade Runner universe and not brought back Harrison Ford. Also, Jared Leto was in it, which like, boo. It is visually stunning. You gotta give it that. On September 24th, I went on a bit of a tirade. I am not immune to the idea that I think sequels and franchises are kind of annoying, and I do want to see some more original works coming out of Hollywood. And I am also the type to binge watch a few movies in a franchise in a row. And that is what happened to me because on September 24th, I watched the original X-Men. Had never seen it before, if you can even believe. The thing about X-Men is that Magneto has the greatest villain origin story, I think, ever of all time, and he's right to have it. Like, I think a lot of the decision making that he does in this movie is forgivable in my eyes. He turns that senator into goo. And I think, like, if somebody turned, I don't know, Matt Gaetz into goo, I wouldn't feel bad. So that dynamic is just the best. I love Charles Xavier and Magneto's dynamic in these movies. They're so old man yowie, you know what I mean? The rest of the movie, I kind of don't give a fuck about. And then the next night, I double featured two more X-Men's. I watched X2, which is like the next sequel, and I actually gave that one 4 stars. I liked that one better because they were like actually working as a team, like especially with Wolverine. Like, he's so resistant to work with them in the first one, and in the second one, he's like, I know these people and we are actually like a team of X-Men. And so the dynamic is better between all of the like adult X-Men. And then later that night, I watched X-Men First Class, which is the one with James McAvoy as Charles Xavier. It's like the origin story of Charles Xavier and Mystique and all of them. And I wanted to like this movie so bad. I just think that if Charles Xavier and Magneto kissed on the mouth, it would immediately become a 5-star movie for me. The thing about X-Men First Class also is like the whole story with Mystique. I like Jennifer Lawrence as an actor, but her plot line in this movie is so dumb. It's all about like, oh, I look more beautiful when I hide my like actual blue skin and like put on this blonde white lady persona. And then there's all of this stuff happening where Magneto is telling her like, no, you're beautiful as you are, like as your mutant form, like that there is beauty in that to be had. But then like all of those lessons go out the window kind of, and then it like flips back around. Like it's too like flip-floppy because obviously like she ends up on Magneto's side in the original movies, so it's kind of like, well, how did she get there? And I sort of like the idea of it being like she found beauty in her mutant self and Charles Xavier never could, and so that made her join Magneto, but then it like flip-flops too much. Anyway, yeah, that was my little X-Men tirade. Maybe I'll watch some more X-Men's. Next up, oh my god, on September 29th, I watched Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Sigourney Weaver. This is a rewatch for me. Do we know what Alien's about? Alien's about this group of people on a ship called the Nostromo. They get woken up out of cryo sleep early and redirected to a planet, and then an alien hops on board and kills them all. This movie is so good. It's like the fucking best, and there's a cat in it, so like how could you say no? But I need to tell you the story of me watching this movie. This was a movie night that I cannot stress enough was not invited to. My friend was invited to a movie night by her friend, and it was at her and her boyfriend's apartment. But then her and her boyfriend broke up. So she wasn't even there, but he was. So it was me, my roommate, my friend who I know, and then a bunch of strangers that she didn't even really know. And he opens the movie night by being like, I just gotta say, like, gotta address the elephant in the room. Like, I know it feels like mom and dad got divorced and we don't want you guys picking sides. And like, we're sitting on the couch, like, it was so funny. This movie is so good though. Watch Alien. On October 4th, I rewatched Akira. Every time I watch Akira, I'm like, surely the body horror won't be so disgusting and horrifying this time around. If you don't know Akira, it is a Japanese anime movie about a Neo Tokyo city post atomic bomb, and it's about this like shadowy science government branch that's like working with these psychic beings, and things go crazy. It gets so crazy. It's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. If you've ever seen somebody do like a slide on a motorcycle and get really low to the ground, that's from Akira. So awesome. It's like just the most awesome movie ever. Also, you might have seen that trend on TikTok of Tetsuo from Akira being like, please leave me alone. Anyway, Akira rules. On October 9th, I watched 2 movies. Get ready for this double feature. I watched them by myself. I had a really, really shitty day at work where I had a meeting with my boss and I cried in it. You know when that happens, when you cry in a meeting at work? It's always fun, isn't it? And then I went home and I watched Inside Out 2, the Disney movie. If you remember, Inside Out 1 is about the emotions inside the mind of this girl named Riley, and Inside Out 2 is about those same emotions, but she's going through puberty as a teenager, and so more of them are showing up, like anxiety and embarrassment and ennui, and it's very cute. It's very well done. It wasn't as emotionally impactful as I sort of expected it to be, because the first one was very emotionally impactful for me, and I had heard that a lot of people were just like openly weeping in the theater watching this movie, and then I didn't. She should have been gay. She should have been gay. She goes to hockey camp and is obsessed with a girl with a red streak in her hair, and she just wants to be her best friend. Okay, okay. I think we all know what's happening here. And then later that night, also on October 9th, I watched Dead Poets Society. Remember at the beginning of the video when I said that the New England boarding school thing would come back around? Here we are, my rewatch of Dead Poets Society on the night after I cried at work in front of my boss. I love Dead Poets Society so much. I love Robin Williams so much. I am unfortunately a Neil Perry Kinney. I have read a lot of Dead Poets fan fiction about Todd and Neil. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, ever, always, forever. It's just so good. Like, there's a reason why everybody loves it. It's because it's so good. On October 12th, I had one of the craziest double feature nights I think I've ever had ever in my life ever. So a friend of mine, Kirsten, had said that she was really, really terrified of The Grudge because she had never seen it, but as a child, she had seen like one scene playing on a TV in like a Buffalo Wild Wings, and it like scarred her for life. So we were like, all right, well, it's Halloween time. Like, let's face your fears and we'll watch The Grudge. We watched the Japanese version called Ju-on, The Grudge. I'm not a horror movie girly. Let me say that straight up right now. And so I was lovingly subjected to a few horror movies this year, and The Grudge was one of them. And oh my God, this movie is so terrifying. In my Notion board, I had to reposition the poster when I added it to my database so that it wasn't the kid's face because I can't look at it. So Ju-on, The Grudge is about these people that come into contact with this demon called the Grudge, called Ju-on. It's basically like a It Follows situation where like if you come into contact with the Grudge, you pass it on to other people that you come into contact with, and it takes the form of this little boy or a young woman, and they're like painted stark white, frightening. It's really scary. And there's something very scary about the Japanese version that I don't think a lot of Western horror movies do, because I think a lot of Western horror movies utilize it being very dark as a fear tactic. And this movie, I would say 80% of the time, we're in like fluorescent light, which almost makes it even scarier because it feels so normal looking. And then there's The Grudge. Later that night, after we watched The Grudge, we watched Yentl, Barbra Streisand's Yentl. So this is the order of events for that night. We finish The Grudge. We say, we need a palate cleanser. We watched one episode of Over the Garden Wall, and then we were scrolling through a library that we have, and Yentl is there. And we were like, let's just have a glimpse at Butch Barbra Streisand singing Papa Can You Hear Me? And then we ended up watching the whole fucking movie. I love Yentl, one of my favorite movie musicals of all time. Yentl is about this girl named Yentl. She lives in a small village. It takes place in like Eastern Europe. I can't remember exactly which Eastern Bloc area it's in, but she lives in this Jewish village. She's the daughter of a rabbi, and her dad has taught her all of these things about the Talmud and how to read and write. And she's very, very loves intellectual discussion and wants to go to school. But she is a girl, so she can't go to school. So she dresses up as a boy and travels to the nearest yeshiva and enrolls there. She gets sort of caught up in a love triangle where she's in love with one of her classmates, but his girlfriend ends up falling in love with her. It's very, very good. And Barbra Streisand is the only person singing. Nobody else sings in this movie. There's no group musical numbers. It's just Barb. Next, on October 18th, another movie night, we watched Ghost in the Shell, the O-Ridge, the animated anime movie about an android, and discussions again of what is a soul and who is allowed to feel alive and who really experiences emotions. And God damn, this movie rules. I give it 4 stars. It's really, really good. And just like that style of animation from that era of anime movies is so awesome. It just fucking rules. So that was really fun. And then after my friends went home that same night, by myself, I watched The Wild Robot, also a top movie for me of the year. When I tell you, I cried 15 separate times while watching this movie. Would you believe me? Because I did. If you love found family, you will love this movie. It's about this helper bot, this helper robot who gets thrown off course in transit and lands on this island that is full of natural life and all of these different ecosystems and animals. And she learns to communicate with the animals and ends up adopting this little tiny runt of the litter gosling. It's so good. It's so good. First of all, gorgeously animated. Again, like what a brilliant year for animated movies. Like it's just so stunningly beautiful to look at. And then the story is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I would like watch some of it and be having a good time, and then something would happen and I would sob, and then I would collect myself and something cute would happen and I'd like get through it, and then something else would happen and I would sob again and then compose myself, and that cycle would just happen until the end of the movie, and I was a blubbering mess. On October 19th, I watched Mars Attacks, the Tim Burton movie, and I will be honest with you, I fell asleep about 2/3 of the way through the movie, sitting up in a chair. This is just a silly, goofy time. It's about Martians making contact with Earth. You know, it's Tim Burton. He just out there doing his thing, making silly, goofy jokes, and the Martians look so funny. Next up, on October 27th, I watched Fantastic Mr. Fox, a rewatch. I just needed like a feel-good fall movie, and it was coming up on my TikTok For You page a lot. This is a 5-star movie for me. It's based on the Roald Dahl book, and it's about a guy named Mr. Fox, and he is a fox, so he loves to steal, and he steals from these guys who then try and blow up his home. Again, very cutely animated. And then we had another triple feature of Spider-Mans. Similar to my X-Man extravaganza, I realized that I never watched any of the Tom Holland Spider-Mans, so I watched all 3 of them. On October 28th, I watched Spider-Man Homecoming. This one is about, you know, Peter Parker doing his thing, learning how to be Spider-Man. I think it's off the back of one of the Avengers when he's like, Tony Stark has like taken him under his wing, but hasn't really given him anything to do outside of like that one job with some other Avenger guys. Anyway, he's like, I can be Spider-Man and I can do a great job. And then he like gets into some shit with the Green Goblin, and it's, fine. 3 stars. And then that same night I then was like, fuck it, we're double featuring this. I watched Far From Home. I find there's a lot of movies where the trope is like, in the sequel we'll go to Europe. I didn't like Jake Gyllenhaal's character very much. That was kind of stupid. But I did like the story of MJ finding out and like figuring out that Peter is Spider-Man. So that was fun. And then I did watch No Way Home with these are the Spider-Manses with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. I had seen clips of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in this movie, and I thought they were going to be in it a lot more than they were. And I kind of wish they were in it a lot more than they were. November 25th, I watched The Muppets, the 2011 movie, a rewatch. It's so fun and so perfect. It's about this Muppet named Walter who grew up with a bunch of human beings, but he loves the Muppets. He grew up watching The Muppet Show and loves Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy and all the gang. And he travels to Los Angeles only to find out that the Muppets Theater is being sold and that they no longer do the Muppet Show. And all of them have like been leading separate lives. And he gets the band back together and raises a whole bunch of money to save the Muppet Theater. I also just remembered recently that year at the Oscars, Manor Muppet won Best Original Song. Good. Then, November 29th, I did indeed hold space and watch Wicked. I'm excited to rewatch this movie with gay people because I watched it over Thanksgiving weekend with my family, and I think I will like it better when I watch it with a bunch of gay people. Listen, this movie is good. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do in part 2 because nothing really happens in Act 2 of Wicked. So I guess they're gonna take things from the book, but the back half of the book is boring. If for some reason you just got here from another planet or you've been really, really living under a rock, Wicked is like an origin story about the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda from Oz, from The Wizard of Oz. And it's about how they were friends at school. And hey, this movie should have been about lesbianism, and it's not. They should have kissed. They really, really, really should have kissed. There's so many scenes where I'm like, why are you touching her face like that and not kissing her on the mouth? The music is so good. I mean, that musical whips. I do wish we had gotten more of like the friend group at Shiz in this movie. Like if they were going to add anything, I wish I would have gotten more scenes with like Galinda, Elphaba, Fiyero, Bach, and Nessa like all hanging out together. It's a good movie. You should watch it. You should watch it. You should hold space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity. November 30th, I watched Twisters. Here's the thing. This immediately went into my top 4 movies of the year. Hey guys, Twisters is really, really fun. Daisy Edgar Jones in those little mock tank tops. Twisters is about a girl who used to be a tornado chaser, and then she gets some bad things happen to her. Trauma happens to her, and she stops doing that, and she becomes a meteorologist, and then gets sucked back into the world of tornado chasing, and meets this guy who's like a YouTuber about chasing tornadoes, and he's kind of like a rednecky kind of guy. But then it's about like actually being empathetic and helping people, which is really, really nice. I think this movie had the potential to really stereotypically portray people in the like southern Midwest, and it doesn't do that. There's a lot of like real actual heart in this movie and doesn't like diminish the people that live in those places, where I think like a lot of other movies do when they talk about the American South. But yeah, this one doesn't, and it's really, really fun. It's really, really fun. I have not seen the original Twister, which is kind of nuts. I feel like I need to see it. It stars Philip Seymour Hoffman, for God's sake. And then the last movie of the year that I watched on December 6th, actually, because I got really, really, really deep into watching The Americans, the television show, and so I didn't watch any movies after December 6th. I watched David Cronenberg's The Fly. David Cronenberg's The Fly. It's about a guy who develops teleportation pods. He's like a scientist kind of guy, and he's like, I got these pods and I can teleport things from one to the other, but it doesn't work on living beings because I got this monkey and it always explodes when I try and put the monkey through the teleporter. And then he's like, I finally figured it out. The monkey stays alive when I put it through the chamber. I'm gonna go in the chamber, but then whoops, a fly gets in the chamber and he becomes a fly man. Giant fly man. This movie's fucking gross. That's kind of all I have to say about that. There you have it. Those are all of the movies I watched In 2024, we did it. If you want, I have a blog. Did you know that? I started it like halfway through the year last year. There's a post on there that is my top fours of the year. Not only movies, but also TV shows and games and books and albums. So if you're curious, you can read that there along with the other things that I've written about. Also, as a reminder, I stream over on Twitch. So if you want to see my face talking at you for an extended period of time, similar to this, but not on YouTube, you can catch me live on twitch.tv/stelllajo, where we'll be playing a lot of video games this year. I hope you guys watch some good movies in 2024 and let me know what movies you plan to watch in 2025. We'll take any and all suggestions. I think I'm going to watch all of the Oceans movies. I've never seen the originals. I've only seen the one with Sandra Bullock. We'll see. All right. Catch you in the next one. Bye.